Hey, folks, good evening, and thanks for joining me tonight on Phantoms and Monsters Radio. I welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first timers in the chat. Now, the terms UFOs and UAPs are generally considered to include any perceived aerial phenomena that cannot be immediately identified or explained. Now, in some cases, sightings and encounters with these anomalies can result in much more drama and dread than the experiencer bargained for. So, regardless of what the public is told, UFOs and UAPs are taken seriously by the U.S. government and NASA, even though full disclosure is unlikely, unless a situation dictates otherwise. Now, for this reason, it is imperative that independent researchers and investigators absent from any government and military connections continue to probe into the phenomenon without interference from the powers that be. So, before I go any further, I just want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our programming. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. Other donation links are also shown in the description. So thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcome. Tell me which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or suggested for upcoming shows. I want to again thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Thomas, and Mike, as well as thank Kevin and Mary at ESP. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them after my presentation. So, in this first account, the witness tells me in the summer of 1951, I was 6 years old, out playing in the front of our house in Louisa, Virginia. I heard a swishing noise and looked up to see what it was. It was a hot, sunny day without any breeze. About 50 to 60 feet above me was a saucer-shaped vehicle hovering and spinning. It caused all the leaves in the trees to fold and turn downward as if trying to avoid radiation or some sort of emission. Electromagnetic, maybe. I was waiting for my grandmother to call me in for lunch, so it was probably about noon. The saucer hovered for about 2 minutes and tilted toward me. At that time, it moved away from my yard and landed behind some trees, blocking its view from my house. I ran into the house and told my grandmother what I had seen, and she just blew it off. I was sitting on my bed looking out the window in the back of the house where I saw the two beings passing along the outer edge of our yard behind some peach trees. They were different heights. One was half head shorter than the other. They seemed to be wearing suits which were rouge red in color. They were walking side by side and moving out of sight from my window. That was my last memory until about 10 p.m. My grandmother and I were standing in the kitchen in the dark, and lunch was still sitting on the counter. At one point, I knew I was in the saucer. It had a window, and I could see the road below. I think we were over the Blue Ridge Mountains, which were visible from our house on a clear day. We were hovering above a car traveling along a winding mountain road. I was watching the headlights from the car flashing into the woods and as it went around curves. I think we may have taken them, but can't remember a lot. I don't recall any words ever being spoken, but they showed me lights off in the distance and said that was where they lived. I had never been on a plane, so watching the car below was something I'll never forget. When I realized I was home, there was blood on my leg and feet that was dried. I never felt any pain and had any effects from this, and didn't think about it again until about when I was 15 years old. I had an exam with a gynecologist, and overheard the doctor ask my mother who had done surgery on me. I had never had surgery. I thought back to that night finding the blood on myself. This has happened more than once. So I know they have some sort of tracking device inside my body. I'm now in Florida and they did some sort of scanning on me. I have a lot of details and would even consent to hypnotherapy. I don't mind others knowing, but the fact is, most don't believe it if you tell them. Contact me if you wish, and we will go into further details. I'm 79 years old and not a nutcase. I never had any mental problems. I have a friend who is an FBI agent, and I gave him the written details as well. Thanks. And I did talk to the witness, and I believe what she encountered is actually did happen. And it was an interesting story. I want to thank Lala Bright for her donation. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. So, in this next account, the witness states this occurred during the evening of Labor Day 2010 while traveling up I 85 from Atlanta, Georgia to Charlotte, North Carolina. I was in the passenger seat of a friend's car. I observed a bright yellow star, which I soon realized was changing in orientation to the surrounding stars. My entire family is in aviation, so I naturally attempted to identify the make of the aircraft I assume it would be. Now, while nearing us, I noticed various neon spectrum colors emanating in sequence from the craft that didn't seem to coincide with any commercial airliner lights I had seen to date. Very rapidly, the craft approached and descended to a very low altitude, roughly 60 feet, just above the tops lining the highway. The craft, whose primary hull was oval, with a structure resembling an iron cross through the axis of the vehicle. Now, one of the squared edges of the cross section was wider than the other three, with four small yet intense yellow lights running parallel to its edge. Now, each of the other three squared sections had a large, intense yellow light. There was a row of 8 multicolored lights flashing along the central axis of the cross section. Each light would flash a different color nearly every time it illuminated. And it did this in constant and rapid succession. The wider section appeared to be the rear at first, but as it approached us and descended just above about the trees, it halted and reversed the course almost instantaneously. Now, we immediately pulled off the highway at Calpin, South Carolina exit, stopped at a closed fireworks shop just off the highway, and walked out into the adjacent field. The craft slowly moved over us, over us, the shot at a dramatic angle towards the west and again halted. It was then approached by an identical craft. Both flashed their sequential lights under the frames directly toward each other. Then both simultaneously made 2 to 3 clockwise rotations around each other, then broke away from one another. Now, these first two crafts traveled silently in opposing directions with dramatic right angle movements toward the two additional craft that had just appeared from behind the rise in the west. Now, the first two repeated the communication dance with the two new craft. The four then began to rapidly comb the area, silently covering great distance with erratic and jerky movements. One of them came back over to our area of the field and flew directly over us, lowering it as it approached and ascending after passing us. This time it did not move in a straight line, but side to side as it moved toward, as if moves forward, as if traveling as some sort of waveform. Moments later, they congregated briefly, then shut off in 4 different directions, all disappearing quickly and silently. Now, this was the most dramatic experience of my life. I do believe that these craft and their occupants were attempting to make contact with us. Now, this next witness states, "Hi, the following account is from my dad. He's told me a few times while growing up. Now, when my dad was 18 or so, back in 1978 or 79, he was riding home from Wednesday night church with his father, his sister, and his brother. Their black Buick made it way back home along an empty stretch of highway. My dad leaned his head towards the glass and watched the stars. He said it was a clear night and he could see the huge expanse of sky stretching to the horizon. We live in a rural area of Clearfield County, Pennsylvania, and even now in 2024 at night, I can see stars affected by light pollution. His vision of the stars was suddenly impeded by a black mass so large he estimated it spanned many miles. His father stopped the car in the middle of the highway, and all 4 passengers got out to stare at this huge, flat, black expanse, the bottom of some sort of craft. It was gigantic and silent. Dad says the little lights shone here and there as if through windows, but it remained unmoving for a moment as his family as they stared in shock at this massive object. It was so large he couldn't identify its dimensions. It just looked flat. He could not even estimate its distance for the size of the thing. Suddenly, a rectangular hatch or a door of some kind lowered, allowing the dazzling bright light to escape from within the craft. And Dad could see that at least there where the door was, this part of the craft was curved like the bottom of a saucer. A much smaller aircraft, then like some weird plane or a strangely shaped rocket, slowly exited the hatch door, which rose up and closed once the craft was free of the doorway. The looming black mass remained still for a moment. Then, as suddenly as the sounds had arrived, it flew away and up into the night sky impossibly fast. The smaller craft left behind, and it too hesitated perfectly still in the night sky before it shot away laterally toward the horizon. Now, my dad and his family were too shocked to move or say anything for several minutes. Finally, my grandfather said, "Come on, y'all, dinner's waiting." They piled back into the Buick. My dad says dinner was quiet. None of them spoke before going to bed. The next day, they didn't speak about it, but by Christmas, a few months later, they treated it like a joke, a novelty story to entertain the extended family. But my dad has never forgotten the experience. My dad is unfailingly honest. He doesn't like tall tales, and he has no interest in unsolved mysteries or unexplained events. And he dislikes sci-fi other than the original Star Trek series. He's just a simple countryman who keeps to himself. He has no other story like this one, so I believe him 100% and that he witnessed this event and that he is not exaggerating anything. I live in the same area he did back then, while he lives about 30 miles away. I drive along the same highway and I pass the same Baptist church he says he passed just before the craft appeared. And I look up into the sky each time and try to imagine what it must have been like to see something so big looming overhead. I've heard theories that UFO sightings and run ins with extraterrestrials can run in families. And I've always had this small hope that one night while driving home, I'll pass the church and have my own experience. So far, my life has been bereft of UFOs, though. Now, a bit of advice I think that you shouldn't, you should be careful what you wish for. But hopefully, if they do have an encounter, it's not going to be a bad one. Now, in this next account, the witness states every August, my family, aunt, uncle, and cousins would spend a week camping at Cowboy Lingo State Forest in West Virginia. It was a tradition because my grandparents used to do the same thing when they were raising my dad and aunt, except we were using campers. Now, back then, we could take our bikes along and go all over the place. So, in the summer of 1991, my cousins, two boys, we were all within 3 years of each other, decided to go to an area we had never been before. I remember seeing a trail sign that had Sleepy Hollow on it, so I suppose that was the name of the area. Most of the trail was along a small creek. It was a very thick forest. It was around noontime and it had been overcast all day. We were raised in a rural area, so our parents didn't worry too much about us exploring the park. There was a group of large rocks near the trail, so we decided to stop and take a look. We were just jabbering when we noticed a loud humming sound coming from above us. We looked up into the trees and were hit in the face with what I describe as a blast of energy. All I can remember is my cousins yelling at me because I had been knocked out. I asked them what happened, and they said that they were knocked out as well. We started to get scared because everything around us seemed different than before. So we headed back to the campsite. When we got back, my mom asked me why we didn't come back for dinner. I looked at my watch, it was gone. I hadn't even noticed. She told me it was just after 7 p.m. No wonder everything seemed strange out on the trail. We must have been knocked out for about 6 hours. My cousins and I were very tired, so much so that we headed to our bunks right after eating. I was exhausted, but I couldn't fall asleep. Now, in the morning, I was feeling very sluggish. My cousins slept until 11 a.m. Now, later in the day, we decided to tell our parents what had happened on the trail. To be honest, our parents thought we were playing a stunt on them by concocting this wild story about being knocked out for 6 hours by a blast of energy. I was very upset with them, especially my dad, because he never let me forget about it. And to this day, he still thinks it was a made up story. Now, my cousins and I still talk about what happened that day. We all feel that we were possibly abducted because of some of the weird dreams each of us has had since then. In 2005, I was diagnosed with leukemia, though I'm now in remission. One of my cousins was recently diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, while my other cousin has suffered kidney disease for over 10 years. We were 100% healthy before the incident on the trail. Though we had never seen any scars or marks on our body, we truly feel that we were physically and mentally violated by something. So, in this next account, an eyewitness contacted me about an unknown winged UAP with enormous eyes and a massive wingspan that reflected light. It also hovered without flapping its wings, creature or craft. So the witness states, "Hello, Mr. Strickler. I just watched the Unsolved Mysteries episode about Chicago Mothman sightings. I decided to write about my incident. The encounter occurred on July 6, 2005 at about 11:30 p.m. I had a long day in San Diego, California, then afterward went to the beach at Del Mar for some surf fishing. I arrived at my home in San Marcos about 11 p.m. After cleaning my fish and showering, I was very tired. I went out to my carport for a smoke and looked at the night sky. I looked north, thinking about a recent UFO sighting and wondering what it was all about. In the distance, at a couple of hundred feet, I saw a faintly visible moving object that flitted from side to side. Whatever it was, it reflected light from the streetlights. Its side to side movement was so fast I couldn't tell if it was one object or two. The object then zipped directly over my neighbor's house across the street. Now, by this time, I was certain I had never seen anything like it. It continued to move side to side in a space of approximately 50 feet. It then stopped and I observed it more clearly. It had big eyes and wing like appendages that were probably 15 to 20 feet in span. I remained still and I could see wavering reflections from its wings, which were not beating like a bird's, but showed shimmering reflections from the streetlights. I felt the hair on my head rise down my back to my ankles. It appeared to be looking at me as I smoked my cigarette. I felt threatened and said out loud, "I see you." Then it went from stationary to out of sight right over my head in an instant. I came out from under my covered carport and turned to follow its movements. Immediately, it zipped into view directly above my head, obviously studying me. I could see weird, large, and intense dark eyes. It seemed surprised by my looking right at it. It didn't like being seen. My apprehension rose even higher. It turned away and disappeared like a shot. It had a bird like shape but was thicker. My impression was of reflections of the streetlight on the wing like appendages and big dark eyes. It wasn't a bird, bat, or any familiar nocturnal creature. Its movements did not seem explicable in comparison to any creature that flies by beating its wings. The hills and mountains are so rugged and inaccessible near my home that anything could remain hidden and make nighttime forays at will. I read about thunderbirds, but I'm not sure if this was one of them. So, in this next account, a Rice Lake, Wisconsin family and their neighbors experienced unexplained activity after the sightings of lights in the night sky. Armed men eventually show up by saying that they were surveyors. Now, I will tell you, that Rice Lake, Wisconsin has a lot of phenomena reported. I've received at least 4 or 5 different reports of different things. There's something about that area. Well, anyway, the the witness states, "Hello, sir. You have my permission to publish this information. I'm a very fact-driven person, but I have this story I can't explain without it being aggravating to me as I see others blow it off as BS. I lived in Rice Lake, Wisconsin for a bit of my youth. I was 12 years old and lived with my mother, father, and 2 brothers on a large property with a house set back from the road about 5 acres of kept lawn and a backyard of 2 acres. It is an open area. We had a radio station across the road, which was a smaller building with a large tower in the field. We lived in farm country. And one neighbor near us on the west side of our house threw this solid tree line that was the start of a pine forest on our property. The other 2 sides of the property had abrupt starts to wheat fields. So one night, my mother, older brother, and I were up watching TV, and the power went out. I went outside to the front to see if the neighbor was out, as he had a large barn light that we could see through the woods. Nope, it was out. And as we sat there, we heard yelling from the radio station. "I can't get the generator to start, Ted. Can you call Chris and get him out here as soon as possible?" Again, farm country, so there's no real ambient sounds beyond crickets. Then within 5 minutes, a car drove past our driveway and turned off. Like it was driving, then powered out and rolled to the side of the road. My older brother made the long 5-acre walk, which seemed long at that age, down the driveway, and mother and I watched from the porch. He came back, said the car just lost all power. He couldn't even get it to crank. Just then, a large blue orb, I'd say about 1,000 square feet or so, shot across from one corner to the other of our rectangle, well cut property from behind our house to across the road, no further than 4 to 6 stories above our house. We just stood there amazed. Across the road, we heard the guys at the radio station screaming, "What the hell was that?" My mom ran in to call the police and woke up my dad and little brother as me and my brother sat there on the porch. "Sons, come in here now. I can't wake your father up." We ran into our bedroom, which was the closest room to the west side tree line and had this huge glass door wall, 6 foot tall glass door basically. And in the bed was my dad and 5-year-old brother. I personally shook them hard. They wouldn't even wake up, breathing fine, even though they were a bit sweaty. They were solidly asleep. Now, at this point, we freaked and noticed the phones were dead as well. We also ran outside again. We started yelling across the yard at the radio station, asked if they had a working phone. They replied no and asked if things were okay with us. Not wanting to yell out a story, my brother said, "Yes, all is well, besides all the weird stuff." Just then, on the west side above the tree line, two orbs far up danced in the sky, zigging and zagging in ways I'd never seen like any before. It was as if the two were puppies playing in a pattern. One would go left, another would chase, then right, then up, then down, do a big circle, then the other. My brother and I just sat and watched, freaking out. "What's going on?" was said about 40 times in 5 minutes while these orbs moved. Then they dropped down to a lower altitude. We saw that the orb was a light on a larger object, but couldn't make out what it really was. But they went from north side of the tree line to the south at half speed, really low and slow. They swooped up into the sky into a large, progressively faster arch. Then they were gone. My mother, who was watching from inside her room through the large glass doors mentioned before, was freaking out. Seeing all this and her husband and kid not waking up was too much to handle, and she cried. Suddenly, the power pops on. My mom screamed as it startled her. She ran inside to see, and she calmed down, splashing water in her face in the master bedroom attached to the bedroom. Master bathroom attached to the bedroom. We go out through the glass door to check the sky and see the car that died out near the end of the driveway started up and took off fast. The neighbor's barn light was on, and we saw the lights on the radio tower lit. At that moment, my dad woke up and said, "Why are you all in here?" It startled us. My mom explained it all, and he and my younger brother just laughed it off. "I was just sleeping. You must have tried very hard to wake. You must not have tried very hard to wake us." The next day, my mom buys a rifle, a telescope, and a bunch of alien books. She's always had the gun. She's always said the gun was there just in case. She would never bring it out unless she felt she had to. I think my dad didn't wake her to the core. Fast forward to a week later, after so many calls to the police, the radio station, neighbors, and etc., we finally got someone to listen to us at the police station and take a report. They all met in our front yard near the road as I watched from the porch far away, trying to make out what they were saying. 3 days after that, two men come to the house who claimed to work for a surveying company and just so happened to be taking aerial surveys of the area and wanted to see if we wanted some pictures of our house. We had a rather nice house and a well-kept landscape, and they said they visited our neighbors prior to that day and heard a crazy story. My older brother swears, I mean swears, the men had guns on them, large handguns under the backs of their shirts. Again, it's not super weird in the area to see guns, but if you're going door to door with pictures of their house, anyway, it's weird mention. He saw these guns as he walked in the front door behind them to ask why the guy in the van was taking pictures. They abruptly left. When they left, we got the license. We called the officer who took our report and called the neighbor to compare stories. A month later, the officer called back just to tell us that they had found out that the plates belonged to a federal agency. Now, I know this sounds dumb and made up. If I didn't live through it, I wouldn't have believed it. Me and my brother have been blown off so many times about this story, we just stopped saying it anymore. It's like we just nod at each other whenever someone brings up UFOs or weird stuff. Besides my wife, I haven't told this story in at least a decade. I start second guessing my memories, and as simple as these things I remember did happen. So, in this next account, a red UAP appears to be following a car on a foggy night in rural California. When the driver stops the car and gets out to investigate, it marks the beginning of a mystery. So, the witness states, I grew up in the Fresno County and Kings County area of California. Strange things are going on for sure. My dad and I had an experience one night while driving on a foggy country road at night. It was extremely foggy and you could barely see the road. But I noticed a red light was following us above the power lines. I thought that was strange, so I asked my dad who would be crazy enough to fly a plane above the power lines on a foggy night. He thought it was weird too, so he pulled over to have a look. That's when it got weird. I don't know why and still can't explain it, but I panicked and begged my dad to please not get out of the car. The last thing I remember is curling up with a ball on the floor to hide. I don't know why. I remember nothing after that, and my dad would never talk about it, no matter how many times I brought it up. Now, my dad passed away over 10 years ago, so now I'll never know what happened when he got out of the car. But I will tell you this, after that happened, I was terrified of my bedroom window at night. I would wake up so scared I couldn't move. And when I finally could, I'd run into my parents' room and crawl into the bed with them. This didn't happen before the incident, but after. My dad was never the same after the incident. He was withdrawn and not as outgoing as before. My mom noticed the changes as well. I don't know if he confided in her, but she has never mentioned anything about that night in question. I suppose that he never told her what happened either. We moved up north to Modesto for a couple years and never had any more nighttime freakouts, but I still feel chills when I remember the whole thing. Now, in this next account, a U.S. Navy seaman describes the appearance of a while he was huge cigar shaped craft while he was serving on a guided missile cruiser USS Canberra in the English Channel. So he tells me, back in or about 1958, I was 18 years old and on the guided missile cruiser, the USS Canberra. We were doing naval exercises in the English Channel about 300 miles off the coast of France. 80 to 150 various naval vehicles from many different countries were participating in the exercise. I was on watch as a seaman and saw this large gray metallic cigar shaped craft come towards the ship through my binoculars. It was described as a fast moving target according to the radar, traveling 5,000 miles an hour. As the craft neared us, it slowed down and stopped over us. It was hovering 35,000 feet, about 15 miles above us. It was as big as a football field. It stayed hovering over us, and then we turned, and it turned. This went on until my shift ended for about an hour. The craft was metallic gray with no lights and no features on the skin of the craft. When I was relieved of duty, I got some refreshment and came back to the top to watch it further. It had just gone east towards Europe. When it first appeared, it seemed to have come from the tip of Scotland by way of Norway over the sea. Afterward, I went to the bridge to look at the logbook to see what had been recorded about the incident. Nothing was mentioned about the UFO, and the handwriting and ink were identical to both separate listings in the logbook. Very unlikely, since the same person and pen would not have made both entries. The next day, we pulled into port in England, and nothing was ever said about the incident. I was in the Navy from 1956 to 1976. So, in this next account, a couple encounters an unknown craft that's hovering above them in the dark Kansas countryside. They then notice a long window where albino humanoids are seen watching them. So, the witness states, one evening this past summer, my girlfriend and I were driving through the Kansas countryside. After crossing a cement bridge that spanned a river, we pulled into a farmer's access road and parked at the edge of the field alongside the bend of a river with the car pointing east. Not long after we stopped, we noticed a strange light that suddenly approached our location in a quick blur. Hovering above the trees was a dark object, rectangular in shape, with one red and one green running light positioned together on the part of the craft at its center. We stared in amazement and couldn't take our eyes off the object. Now, after 5 minutes or so, we noticed the craft's position had moved to the right. It seemed to move in a very slow motion to the other side of the river. After another 5 minutes, I decided to drive away from the area. As we turned onto the country road and subsequently onto the cement bridge, we saw that the craft had returned to its original position, above us and slightly back from the bridge. I stopped again and went out to look at the craft. The object was about 20 to 25 feet wide, and now I noticed a large rectangular glass window, or what appeared to be glass, running across the middle third of its front. Standing inside to the left side, looking down on us, were two beings, which I could only see from the waist up. I could tell that these beings were about 4 feet tall with abnormally large heads and large black eyes. The eyes seemed devoid of emotion, and their skin was pure white like the moon, and the texture resembling that of an albino salamander. Their eyes ran almost north to south with their heads. The craft hovered silently the whole time. After about a minute of eye contact with the humanoids, I got back into the car and rapidly drove away from the area. We could still see the craft hovering where we had left it. Sometimes we both get an urge to return to the spot and just sit there and talk about our shared experience, kind of hoping these beings would stop by. So that's the last account, folks. If you have any questions or you want to mention something, feel free to do so. Please use all caps, and Kevin will get them back to me. Also, if you want to mention and in here, if you have any subject that you'd like me to try to talk about next time or afterwards or soon after, I'll try to accommodate you. Just depends what I got available. Dagnammit. If you saw what you believed was an alien spacecraft, what would you do? Well, I will tell you this. It's kind of hard to believe, but I don't believe I've ever seen a UFO. Now, I've seen a lot of orbs. I mean, what I consider a UFO. I mean, I've seen a lot of orbs and a lot of weird things in the woods and in the sky that were floating or traveling or flying or whatever you want to say. But I don't think I've ever had a real sighting of a large craft or anything like that. Um, what would I do? God, I don't know. I have no idea what I do. I guess it depends on the situation. Sir Wolf, hi Lon. Do you think in many, but not all cases, it's the astral body that's abducted as opposed to the physical body? I've wondered that myself, and I think that does happen. I during my abduction, I sometimes thought, well, maybe that was my case because it was kind of weird. I felt like I was actually there, but in a way, I kind of felt I wasn't. Like being by location. And I've had others tell me the same thing. They felt that they were in two places at one time. Could be millions and billions of miles away from each other, but they do believe, some of them believe, that they were in a by location situation. I don't know if that's possible. I guess it probably is, but it does happen. I do hear things about that. Dre MF, any recent stories on the rake? Or you mean the crawler humanoids? Occasionally I get them. I don't get them as much as I used to. Um, it's interesting. I was thinking the other day that we really haven't been seeing a whole lot of the crawler humanoid sightings as we did maybe a year or so ago, or the time I wrote the book. Um, I don't know. It's interesting. I haven't really heard much of anything, and but occasionally we'll see an account pop up, but it's not as prevalent as it was before. If I mean if you want me to do an you know do a show about it, I can dig a bunch of them up. Let me know. But yeah, I can do that. I don't know when the last time was I did a show about the crawlers, but yeah, I can do that. Any other questions, folks? So Sir Will says some things are worth waiting for. Well, if that's what you want, that's what I'll do. Any other questions? Any other statements? Okay, well, we're not going to put a lot of dead air on here. So, again, I want to thank you all for coming in here, and thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. And if you did donate, it's truly appreciated. Your support's what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. And if you have a sighting or encounter report that you would like to be considered for the personal report show or post to Fans of Monsters, please contact me at lonstricklerfansmonsters.com. I see Dre MF. It'd be cool. Haven't heard much about the phenomena anywhere recently. Yeah, it has been kind of sparse. Um, I mean, there was a time I was getting reports about these crawlers everywhere, and all of a sudden now it's just very rare. Now, it's funny because I'll probably get a bunch of them this week. You watch. So anyway, so if that's what you want me to do, I'll go ahead and do a crawler show next week, and we'll see what comes of it. And I hope you enjoy it. Now, I did write a whole book about it, so it's funny. I still don't know much about the phenomena. Uh, after receiving all the stories and hearing all kinds of crazy tales about what people had experienced and what they had seen and what they felt, I mean, it's still hard to imagine something like that. I don't even know what I'd do if I saw one of those things. Well, anyway, what's this about? Well, perhaps Dogman is finally getting rid of the crawlers and the rakes. Maybe that's what's going on. I have no idea. So, anyway, until next week and until we meet again, stay healthy and safe. Have a great weekend. Have a great Memorial Day. And good night and take care.